All right, on to section 1.5, which is concerned with bias, namely sources of bias in our sampling methods. So, if the results of the sample are not representative of the population in some way, then the sample has bias. Now, there are three main sources of bias in sampling. There's sampling bias, which means the technique used to obtain the individuals in the to be in the sample tended to favor one part of the population over another. Convenience samples have big problems with this, right? Or, for example, you didn't have everybody listed. It's called an incomplete frame. So, for example, if I want to poll all my students, but I don't have a list of all my students, for example, that would be a sampling bias. Okay, not to be confused with sampling error, which is going to come later, but sampling bias, meaning the way you've drawn the sample is unfair. Then you have non-response bias, namely, that's when you send out a survey, but not everybody responds to it, right? Or you try to call up people on the phone, but they hang up on you, right? They won't respond. They won't give you answers, okay? Some ways to deal with that, to be honest with you, there's always some kind of problem with non-response, pretty much, even on the census, the U.S. Census. So one of the things they do is they try to call people back. They try to offer incentives, cash prizes, rewards for answering your questionnaires. Consumer Reports does that. They'll send you surveys about, how's your car doing? But, enter to win, send us back your response and you could win a car. You could win $1,000, whatever. And then there's the response biases, things that people do or say incorrectly. So, for example, the interviewer could be wrong. There's some classic examples of teachers being the one asking students about their drug use in high school. It's like, I'm not going to tell you. So, that kind of thing. So that the interviewer is untrustworthy, or they are wrong, or they ask the wrong questions, they screw up, they don't follow the procedure, that kind of thing. There's misrepresented answers. Sometimes people misrepresent facts. They lie. They want to believe better about themselves. So a classic example of this is if you ask people whether or not they donate blood, way more people say they do than actually do because they want the interviewer to think well of them. Okay. All right. What about wording of questions? You can totally word a question so that it leads you to a biased answer. Like, don't you agree that, healthcare for all is a bad idea, blah, blah, blah. That kind of thing. But the way you're saying it, the negativity, and of course, it generally isn't that obvious. It's more subtle. Using double negatives sometimes gets people confused about what they're answering. How you order the questions. So you could ask a whole bunch of questions about recent deaths by gunshot, and then the last question should be about gunshot control or gun control. You imagine because you've loaded it with all sorts of previous questions about recent deaths because of gunfire, that people are going to be more inclined to say, yes, let's control guns, right? All right, what about type of questions? Sometimes, and this happens to me all the time, like they'll send me a questionnaire in my email or something through work, and they'll only have like yes, no, or how do you feel about this? Agree, strongly agree, disagree. It's like, well, I don't think any of those things. I have a nuanced opinion. I think it's sometimes this and sometimes that and sometimes something else that you're not even allowing me to answer. And you don't get those opportunities. So the question is closed, like a multiple choice. It's not open for you to write written response and say more about what you really think. And of course, the person entering the answer, or you, if you're doing a survey, I do these all the time at work. They'll send me a survey. They want to know how I feel about, the president's latest speech or something. And I'll accidentally press a wrong number, or I'll press submit before it's all done, or that kind of thing. So I can make mistakes. The person collaborating, collating the data makes a mistake, that kind of thing. All right. So those are the main ones. Now here are all these examples. So you pause me and you fill them out, and I'll be back with the answers. All right, poof, there they are. So letter A was interviewer error. They read the script incorrectly. This one is data entry error. It was typed wrong. This one is an incomplete frame. They didn't get all the students' names in the list. This one is order of questions, because they always put the one, or it's actually order of responses. They always put the high number first, no matter what. That made it so that it wasn't random. This one's non-response error. This one is not an open-ended question, so that's not fair. This one's misrepresenting the answers, and this one is biasing the thing with the questions, wording of questions.